The following presentation will explain various components in relation to the submission and review process for Ohio's statewide credit transfer guarantee initiatives. This presentation will cover an overall submission and review process, a timeline for the submission and review process, guidelines for review panel members, and responsibilities of a panel lead. There are two types of review processes depending on the nature of each submission. Full review is our normal process where new submissions and resubmissions are made by institutions which will be reviewed by the entire faculty review panel for the respective credit transfer guarantee area. All submissions require a syllabus, as most of the course and program data can be obtained from the syllabus. The review panels prefer to see a working syllabus with a detailed daily or weekly calendar, including labs, textbook chapters and chapter titles, and/or the learning outcomes being met. A tentative schedule is still needed for any new courses or programs. Under full review, learning outcome descriptions in the submission form are necessary so panel members understand how students in that class are meeting each learning outcome. When describing student learning outcome, using verbiage from Bloom's taxonomy is a great way to show rigor in the student learning. In addition, indicating how students are assessed for each outcome is an important part of each description. Transfer Assurance Guide and Career Technical Assurance Guide submissions will include an estimate of the time spent on each outcome. This information needs to be verifiable and consistent with the information in the syllabus. Submissions are forwarded to the Ohio Articulation and Transfer Network, or OATN staff, who will check for the completeness of each submission. OATN staff then sends all the submission materials to the panel lead for each area through the Course Equivalency Management System, or CEMS. The panel lead checks each submission to ensure that the proposal seems like a good match to the statewide guarantee criteria and pushes forward the submission to the panel members. All of the panel members are expected to participate in the review cycle. Panel members examine course or program learning outcomes and credit hours. Additionally, panel members verify supplementary requirements when they exist, such as co-requisites and prerequisites, laboratory hours, and types of laboratory activities that complement the application. Most panel members use textbooks as one of the tools when validating learning outcomes. Though the review panel does not endorse particular textbooks, the course or program content coverage may depend heavily on a textbook. The panel will take that information into consideration to ensure that the course or program meets the statewide criteria. These members all also consider a course's credit hours because this is a common indicator to the breadth and depth of a course. Once the panel members complete the reviews, the panel lead, taking panel member input into consideration, will summarize and make the final decision on whether a match should be approved. The panel lead will determine and facilitate, if necessary, a follow-up conference call or web conferencing with the panel members about the review feedback. The comments that the panel lead makes in the Course Equivalency Management System will be used by the institutions to improve their submissions. The panel members are anonymous to the public. The panel leads will assist institutions if they have questions about the review outcomes and comments. This slide is an example of the submission and review process timeline. There are typically 2 review cycles per year in the spring and fall. As you can see, submissions are first due from the institution. Then each review cycle begins. The panel lead is responsible for ensuring that the reviews are completed by the panel members on time so that they can meet the review end date. November 6th is listed as the end of the fall review cycle. This date is when the panel leads will return all the reviewed submissions with the final panel decisions to the Ohio Articulation and Transfer Network staff through CEMS. To meet this deadline, each panel lead will need to assign an earlier deadline for their panel members. Please remember that the panel lead will need sufficient time to summarize panel members' comments and make the final decision to grant statewide credit transfer guarantee. The next few slides identify 10 guidelines for review panel members. The first 2 guidelines include all reviews will be conducted electronically through the Course Equivalency Management System during the designated time frame. The next guideline is panel members are to represent their discipline rather than their institutions. Panel members may use courses or programs being offered at their institution as a reference point while reviewing, but the overall goal of reviewing is not deciding whether a submitted course or program meets their own institutional course or teaching methodology. A panel member's role is to provide the best and most appropriate content expertise in his or her respective discipline. Panel members may find a submission with a course or program that they or their colleague teaches. Panel members will be asked to review this type of submission unless they inform the panel lead that they intend to recuse themselves from reviewing. Next guideline is that panel members are to utilize consensus as a guiding principle. Rather than simply making a panel decision by a majority vote, each panel member's observations and insights should be taken into consideration for the final outcome of the panel decision. Though one panel member should not prevent a submission from being approved, that panel member's concerns should be discussed and considered by other panel members. OAT and staff will rely on the panel lead to make professional judgment. The next bullet is that the panel members are to determine the extent of a match to learning outcomes. Another guideline is that the panel should have an agreed upon definition of rigor in its application to their discipline. This is very useful when new members join a review panel so that everyone is on the same page with the level of rigor expected by the review panel to reach a consensus. The next guideline is reviewing decision options. There are 3 options: approved, disapproved, and pending. The panel members can either approve or disapprove the match or put the match status as pending. Disapproved means the match does not clearly meet the statewide criteria. Pending status typically means that the panel members think the course is very close to meeting requirements, but more information is needed to validate the statewide criteria. In either case, for disapproved or pending, the submission would go back to the institution needing additional steps for improvement. Whenever panel members disapprove or give a pending decision, they should be very specific and provide constructive feedback for their decision. The next guideline requires panel members to report any policy or technical problems to the OAT and staff. Even if these issues are outside of articulation and transfer, please feel free to contact the OAT and staff who will refer you to the appropriate contact at the Ohio Department of Higher Education. The next guideline is to make sure that if panel members are unable to review, they should let their panel lead and OAT and staff know. Being on a sabbatical leave doesn't necessarily mean that they need to resign. OAT and staff would like members to continue their work on the panel as long as they are able to. OAT and staff also understands that the panel members' schedules can become overwhelming at times. Lastly, it's important to communicate immediately with the OAT and staff and the provost's office when panel members decide to resign or retire from the review panel. Next few slides explain panel lead's responsibilities. The first responsibility of the lead is facilitating and coordinating each review in a timely manner. The second and third bullet points go hand in hand. The panel lead is to take all panel members' viewpoints into account when making a decision on behalf of the group. The review process is based upon panel consensus. The panel lead is responsible for taking into account any concerns and opinions of their panel members, rather than simply determining the outcome by a majority vote. If there is no consensus, it is the panel lead's responsibility to organize a teleconference, a discussion via email, or a face-to-face meeting to further clarify issues. OAT and staff can also arrange a conference call or webinar if needed. The fourth responsibility is serving as a liaison between the OAT and staff and the review panel. If another initiative requires the panel's input, OAT and staff will consult with the panel lead. The lead may decide to consult with the panel members to reach their professional opinion. The fifth is to provide assistance to institutions or submitters as necessary during the submission process. The panel lead will provide as much assistance and/or clarification as possible on behalf of the panel to help institutional submitters improve their submissions. The sixth responsibility is that panel leads are responsible for setting a deadline for panel reviews to be completed. This date will be earlier than the OATN deadline because the panel leads will need time to summarize and set up further discussion when necessary. Lastly, because the panel is to represent the discipline, it is a panel lead's professional responsibility to inform and advise OATN staff that the statewide criteria need to be updated or that the panel proposes a new statewide guaranteed course. The panel lead will communicate and work with OATN staff to facilitate that process. If someone is interested in serving on a statewide faculty review panel, such requests will be communicated to the OATN staff through the provost or chief academic officer. Thank you for watching. Hopefully you now have a better understanding of the submission and review process, as well as the panel lead and member roles. If you have further questions, please feel free to contact any of the Ohio Articulation and Transfer Network staff or visit the Transfer Credit Ohio website at transfercredit.ohio.gov.